joined by the cable guy, a.k.a. on Twitter. What's shaking, cable guy?
Finally got all my cable, not really issues, but my cable situated, if that makes sense. I mean, it makes sense. It's just kind of a stupid way to put it. But my cable situation is situated now because I've got my little man cave. I actually have like a man cave now. I had one in my previous house. Now I actually have my own big room with a couple TVs so I can watch a couple different games at once, which is certainly going to be nice. And I've got a couple DVRs set up, so we're all set finally here, TV-wise. So yeah, I'm excited to utilize this while, of course, college football season's over. But college basketball season is in full force, and we will certainly be talking about Big Ten basketball for the next few months now, Troy.
Yeah, and I say it every time. Third season doing it. Third.
Yeah.
Third whole season doing it, so I'm pretty excited about that. But your cable issues, Kevin. That's I'm glad you got those all taken care of. That's why I shouldn't say I don't have issues, but that's why I went to DirecTV.
Yeah.
I've not had a problem with DirecTV. Now I should find some wood to knock on. But the main reason I got DirecTV, of course, was NFL Sunday Ticket. That was the main reason.
Yep.
But like you said, Kevin, we're recording this show on championship football night. We're not going to go over the championship game because our show probably will not be posted until after the game. So it's just all Big Ten basketball from here on out. We might dabble some hockey in there. I love hockey. So we might dabble some Big Ten hockey in there. Might dabble a little bit of women's basketball in there, too, as we go through.
Baseball,
maybe
softball. Baseball, softball, we always touch on.
Yeah, as the spring rolls around, add a few wrinkles to our show. But, we go back to it. This is where it all started, Big Ten basketball. And, Kevin, it's here. I told you I got to listen to Wisconsin-Penn State last night. We'll talk about that game a little bit later. It's always nice when Wisconsin plays Penn State because then I can actually listen to it if I can't find it anywhere else. But take it away, youngster. We're going to go over the AP Top 25, and then we're going to talk Big Ten.
Yeah, I think last week there were – it's pretty funny. Last week there were 7 at first when we started doing, the show this year as far as covering basketball. There were 7 teams from the Big Ten in the top 25. Then it dwindled to 6, and then last week it was back up to 7. This week it's down to 4. And the 3 teams, Wisconsin dropped out of the rankings. They were 22. Nebraska dropped out of the rankings. They were 24. And Iowa dropped out of the rankings. They were 25. Those are the only 3 teams that dropped out of the top 25 from last week to this week in the entire country. Not talking about the Big Ten, the entire country, Wisconsin, Nebraska, Iowa. So we're down to 4. But obviously Wisconsin, Iowa, Minnesota, Purdue, Nebraska, they're all receiving votes. I think that's it from the Big Ten. Maryland, if I didn't say them, that's 3. 6. 6, realistically, if you want to extrapolate this. 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32. So the Big Ten has 10 teams in the top 32, if I'm doing my math correctly here, which, excuse me, it makes sense for what we've been saying when we've talked about Big Ten basketball this year. We haven't talked about it much, but we are starting to talk about it now full-time on this podcast. There are 10 teams from the Big Ten that have a legitimate shot at making the NCAA tournament, and that's not a stretch, and we're seeing it just in the AP voting. There's 10 teams in the top 32 right now in terms of teams getting votes. So there's 10. Now, there's only 4 in the top 25, and if bids get stolen come March Madness and Wisconsin, Iowa, Minnesota, Purdue, Nebraska, Maryland, not even talking about the 4 in the top 25, but if those teams don't put together good resumes over the next 3 months, then you're screwed. That's it. Done. Actually, 2 months. There's only 2 months left, realistically, through mid-February, through mid-March, and then boom. That's it. So these teams have 2 months to basically make a compelling argument that, hey, we deserve to be in the top 68, and when it comes to at-large bids, the top, I don't even know what it is, top 36 or something like that. I don't even know. But in any case, So there's 10 legitimate teams in the Big Ten. We've already talked about the 4 teams that really don't have much of a shot this year, and that's already come true in the first 4 games of conference play. Northwestern, Rutgers, Penn State, Illinois. You can just write those teams off. And not to say that we won't talk about them, not to say that they're not interesting, but those 4 teams.
Well, one of them's going to pull off an upset somewhere along this season. And I'm sure glad it wasn't Penn State over Wisconsin yesterday. That's all I got to say. But one of those 4 teams, youngster, is going to pull off a big upset.
Yep.
Not just like, oh, yeah, we beat Penn State. Oh, we beat Illinois, or Illinois, we beat Penn State. No, it's going to be like Penn State, could they take down Wisconsin? I don't think they will. They had one chance last night. They didn't play very well. But it's going to be someone like that. One of those bottom 4 teams is going to have an upset over one of these teams that is trying to jockey out of the middle of the pack. And it's going to happen. And here's what we're seeing already, Kevin. Like you said, 10 teams in the top 32 as far as receiving votes, but only 4 in the top 25. What'll happen if teams aren't careful? Win at home, lose on the road. Win at home, lose on the road. And all of a sudden, these teams in the middle of the pack beat each other up, and they finish one game under 500 in the Big Ten, had a good non-conference, 19 and, maybe they're 19 and 11, 19 and 12, 18 and 13, but they're sub 500 in the Big Ten because they can't win on the road. And all of a sudden, we go from these 10 hopefuls going to the big dance down to 4 or 5. And it could happen. That's what happens when you're 10 deep in a conference. The number 10 team can beat the number 5 team. And it can be on a nightly basis. Because we've talked about this every year we've done the show. The number of games separating 3 through 9 usually isn't that many. It's like 2. 2 or 3. And I see it again this year, Kevin. So what teams are going to separate themselves? They've, like you said, they've got a month and a half to do it. Take it away. Just had to throw that in there.
Yeah, it's a 20-game Big Ten regular season. So I believe that's more than any other conference. I think the ACC is pushing to 20 starting next year. But I think the Big Ten is the first to actually push it to 20 and get it going starting this year. I believe.
Yeah, and you and I like it. We like the 20 games.
Yeah.
Because we've always talked about fairness.
Yep.
And last year you look at Nebraska. Well, they didn't play the big guys all that. They only played the big guys a couple times.
Right.
And they didn't fare very well. But in all fairness, when you're talking about a conference, Kevin, and I know there's 14 teams, so that would be 26 conference games. That's a lot. But if you really want to have an argument, that is the fair thing to do because you get every team at home and on the road. You don't just have to play a Michigan on the road or a Wisconsin at home. You'll get those teams home and away. And so in all fairness, if you could figure out a way to do 26 conference games and play every team once, home and away, to me that is the best way to do it. And I know it's tough because of the number of teams in the conference, but I think that's the most fair way to get things done.
Yeah, we'll probably never see it, but that would be the most fair way to do it. It almost seems like it's never fair in sports when it comes to scheduling.
Well, we know that. You and I both played sports, youngster. We know sports aren't fair.
Right.
Life's not fair.
Right.
But in a perfect world, if you really want to make that conference, like, I don't even want to use the word fair. I guess equal for every team. You need to play every team twice, home and away.
Right.
And like you said, we'll never see it. It will never happen because no way are they going to cut into the non-conference schedule because that's where they have their cupcake season. But I would have no problem if all of a sudden the Big Ten came out and said 26-game schedule, home and away for every team. I would probably jump up and down for joy. I'd probably have to pull my car over.
Yeah, no, I would be ecstatic as well. Moving on, finally, top 25, AP top 25. Top 4 teams are the same: Duke, Michigan, Tennessee, Virginia. Nothing's different there. Gonzaga's moved up to 5. Michigan State's up to 6. Kansas is down to 7. They lost a game. Texas Tech is up to 8. Virginia Tech is 9. And good old Nevada, Nevada has finally lost a game, and they lost by like 27 points or something ridiculous to New Mexico. I was saying that I figured they would go undefeated going into March Madness, and that was absolutely not the case. They lost a game by, I think it was 27 points.
You jinxed
to New
them.
Mexico. I was surprised to see they lost, first of all, but I think it was 85-58, and I was like, what in the world? And I checked to see who played, and they had their guys. They were right there. They just shot like crap. The other team shot well. Nevada shot like worse than crap. But that's what can happen in a one-game scenario. Nevada can lose. Duke can lose. The NCAA Tournament, Duke's going to play a 16 seed because they'll be a number 1 seed. They can lose. It's Duke. They'll be the favorite to win it all, but a lot of people thought Virginia could win the whole thing last year. And Virginia lost by double digits in the first round to a 16 seed. Because it just takes one team to make 7 more threes on any given night, and boom, you're done. That's exactly what happened in Nevada. The other team made 7 more threes. But that can happen in any single game.
I just want to throw this out there, though, youngster.
Yeah.
I don't see Duke as a number 1 losing to a 16, and here's why.
No,
Even
I don't.
If they're having a poor shooting night on the outside, Duke always has a big in the middle. They're just going to feed the post. They'll just dominate in the paint. Whereas when you look at that Virginia team, they really relied on slowing the game down and getting efficient possessions. Whereas Duke can run and gun, Duke can play half court, Duke can feed the ball into the post. They can score in a number of different ways. Virginia really, when you look at it, I hate to call them one-dimensional, but really that's the kind of basketball Tony Bennett's playing out there. Is he's going to play in a half court, he's going to slow it down and look for offensive efficiency.
Right.
And if they shoot bad and the other team shoots good, exactly what happened last year. And so when a team does that, hey, great. You may be very good, but you better hope that you shoot well, and you better hope that the other team doesn't catch fire. And I think if a team catches fire against Duke, Coach K is just going to say, well, go ahead, shoot your threes, and we're going to feed the post. Eventually you may miss. And I'm not saying they couldn't lose, but Duke has a different philosophy and different players than what a Virginia did. I just wanted to throw that out there, youngster. The teams like Duke and North Carolina, they have the perimeter play, plus they have the bigs in the middle where they can just feed it in if they're having a bad shooting night. It's not what they want, of course, but they can flip the switch and they can change the game plan. Be like, fine, we're 1 of 12 from 3, time to feed it into the paint every time we go down there. So I just wanted to throw that out.
No, and I completely agree with you 100%. I think that Michigan can certainly beat Duke. Michigan State could beat Duke. They could win the whole thing this year. But Michigan is more susceptible to losing any random game than Duke is, because Michigan slows it down more than Duke does, and Duke has a better time fastening the game up, or if they need to slow it down and they need to punch it inside, they are more well-rounded than Michigan. Michigan State is more well-rounded than Michigan. You can go down the list. And it's not that Michigan can't win a national title. They're 15-0. They've beaten good teams. They will continue to beat good teams. They, I'm sure, will make a very nice run in March. But they're just more susceptible to losing than Tennessee is, or than Gonzaga is, or than Kansas is, although Kansas just lost their top big guy. So that hurts. But
yeah, that's a big loss.
Yeah. A team like Texas Tech is another one. Texas Tech's defense right now is looking like it's by far the best defense in the country, but it's looking like, arguably one of the better defenses in the last few years in college basketball. They're that stout defensively, and they played Duke, and Duke won the game. It was like, I forget, it was like 68-58 or something like that, but they really slowed Duke down. They really made them, shoot extremely poorly, but at the end of the day, Texas Tech just doesn't have the offense to, put 70 points on the Duke. And even if you hold Duke down, it's tough to score a lot of points if that's just the way your team is configured. But so, yes, not every team, is every team, not every team, I shouldn't say that. There are plenty of teams that can win the national title, but Michigan has to win it a certain way. Duke doesn't necessarily have to win games a certain way. Not to take anything away from Michigan, not to pump up Duke any, but
well, I'm going to throw this out there, youngster. In today's basketball, and primarily everything gets compared to the NBA. You got these big guys that are shooting three-pointers, and you got to be 6'10" and be able to shoot from the perimeter. Blah 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 blah. You know me, I'm an old school guy. You need a guy, a rim protector, and a guy that can score in the paint. And I'm going to throw this out there. I talk about Wisconsin basketball, and for young people, and I'll maybe even throw you in there, youngster. When I was growing up, the Badger basketball program sucked. I'd turn it off. Like, I didn't even want to watch it. They were so horrid. Like, when I went to UW-Whitewater, man, we would just hope every time the Badgers got on that they would be in the game. So it wasn't that long ago that they were horrid. And you look at these runs that they had, and they had Frank Kaminsky, sure. But what did he bring to the table? That team was still guard-heavy, Kevin, and Wisconsin still relied on a perimeter shot. But they could feed the ball inside to a big guy that could dominate. Yeah. That was the difference. So my point is, you take a look at Wisconsin basketball, and everybody thinks, oh, they're pretty good. They've had a couple down years, but they've been a pretty good national team. Only for the last 10 years. And that's because they had a resemblance of a big guy, and now they've got Hap. So when you have a guy in the middle that you can actually have as and I'm air quoting, go-to guy, it helps when your guards aren't shooting well. And when your guards are shooting well and your big is playing well, you blow teams out, a.k.a. Badgers versus Penn State last night. And I just want to throw that out there because as much as basketball has changed, when you get down to the nuts and bolts of what does it take to win a national championship, you've got to have a guy in the middle so that when you have that bad shooting night, you don't have to just sit there and, oh, my God, and panic. You just change up what you're doing and give it to your big guy and just pound it in the paint. As you can tell, the octaves in my voice got a little higher because I watch sports change, and I'm okay with the change, youngster. But at the end of the day, it comes down to fundamental basketball, and you have to have a big. That's all I got.
Yeah, there are a lot more four-guard systems, out there, and that's what Kansas is going to have to change to. And we saw it last year. Villanova won the whole thing because they were just a ridiculously efficient offense that had a number of shooters, and you can win that way. But Villanova always has one good big guy. Like, it's not just all guards and one tall guy who has no chance of making the NBA. Almost every single Villanova team these last few years has been four-guard starting lineups, and, their stars are on the outside, but they almost always have a big guy who either makes the NBA or is in the G League now, it's called. So they've got a quality big. They always do. And that's why Villanova's always good. It's not because of one big, but it's because they're not completely overly reliant on shooting the three. They're really good at it. They're fantastic. Last year they were unbelievable at it. They were unbelievable historically as far as offensive efficiency goes, but they still had a really good big inside. So anyway, fads will be fads, and the game will change, and players will shoot the three ball more efficiently now than ever. But you're right; you still have to have somewhat of a big inside, not only for your offense but defensively and on the glass. That's never going to change. Teams are going to miss it a lot. You need rebounders. That's never going to change. So anyway, very quickly, top 25. Michigan 2, Michigan State 6, Ohio State 16, Indiana 22 is the very quick recap of it. Like I said, there's 10 teams in the top 32 according to the AP in terms of voting. This will change every single week. I don't assume that I would assume that 4 teams will be the fewest the Big Ten will have in any single week, but who knows? Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they're just going to keep beating up on each other, and no one will look good except Michigan and Michigan State so far. Anyway, is how it looks as far as the elite teams go in the Big Ten. But moving on from there, wanted to quickly touch on the standings. Every team has played, not every team has played 4 games. Most teams have played 4 games. What is it? 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 teams have played 3. But so far, Michigan State on top of the conference at 4-0. There are 3 3-1 teams, Indiana, Maryland, Wisconsin. There are 3 more 2-1 teams, Ohio State, Minnesota, Purdue. All those teams, what did I just list off? 8 teams. They're all 8 of them are in contention for making the NCAA tournament. The other 2, Iowa, Nebraska, down at 1 and 3. So that's something to keep an eye on, is Iowa and Nebraska going forward, because if you start piling on Big Ten loss after Big Ten loss, that's what's going to make Iowa and Nebraska 9th and 10th in this conference. And if you finish at 500 and you finish 20 and 10 even, and you exit in the second round of the Big Ten tournament because you lose to Indiana or Michigan State or Michigan or Ohio State or whoever, that's probably not going to be good enough. It just won't, because you won't have enough good wins, most likely, on your resume. So you want to be above 500 in the Big Ten. Even though it's 10 deep, 10 good teams deep, you'll still want to be above 500, and you still want to make somewhat of a run in the Big Ten tournament to ensure your spot. Even though there's 68 teams making it, it's still somewhat hard to make the NCAA tournament. Just ask Nebraska a year ago. But also at 1 and 3 in the Big Ten, Northwestern. And then you've got some winless teams. Rutgers is 0 and 3, Penn State 0 and 4, Illinois 0 and 4. Those 4 make up the bottom of the conference: Northwestern, Rutgers, Penn State, Illinois. To be fair, Northwestern has the same record as Iowa and Nebraska, but we'll see how that shakes out over the next few weeks and months. But the top 10 teams are even 4 games in, either tied or in the top 10 of the conference. And that's how I see it continuing to play out. I mean, maybe one week Northwestern will have a better record than Iowa or something, but in general, those bottom 4 teams, I think, are going to consistently probably be on the bottom of the conference. I don't really see that changing. Is there anything else you have, Troy, before I start recapping what happened this past week?
Nope, you read off a long list, and I know you look at the 4-0 and you're like, oh yeah, they're 4-0, but then you just read off a long list of 1-loss teams.
Yeah,
and that's what I'm saying. You lose, and you can go from being tied for 3rd or being tied for 2nd, I guess, right now, to and then I guess you'd be potentially tied for 4th, but you'd be tied with 4 teams. So that's what we're talking about here. For those listening in, there are 10 quality teams, but if they beat each other up and they can't separate themselves in the Big Ten, we might be here in March, Kevin, talking about 4 or 5 teams only making it from the Big Ten. I hate to say it, but like you and I have talked about, for sure I think there's 8 teams that should get in and a couple teams that are on the bubble. But, yeah, they legitimately have 10 teams that are fighting for spots in the NCAA tournament. But, again, you are who your record says you are. And if you can't win on the road in this conference, you're probably not going to be dancing in March. You've got to find a way to win a couple road games. Otherwise, you're done.
Yeah. My guess is right now that 7 make it. I'll stick with that, but we'll see. Obviously, plenty of basketball to go on. I will recap what happened this past week, starting with January 2nd, because that is basically the last time we did a show. Yeah. Yep. January 2nd. That's officially when Big Ten season really picked up. Teams had 2 regular season games, or in-conference games, I should say, earlier in the year, like November, early December. But from now, this point on, January 2nd on, that's when it's all Big Ten basketball. So starting there, no huge surprise on January 2nd. That was a Wednesday. Michigan State killed Northwestern by 26 points. I want to say about Michigan State these last few games, though, and this will obviously be bigger when I talk about Michigan State, Ohio State, but Michigan State has been without Josh Langford, and Josh Langford, I believe, is still their top leading scorer as far as points per game is concerned. No, he's not. He's actually down to third because Winston and Ward have had to pick things up. But Langford's out right now with a minor injury. I'm not sure exactly when he'll be back, but it's minor. I mean, I'm assuming in the next week or two he'll be back. But so Cassius Winston, Nick Ward have really had to pick up the slack, both of them juniors, Winston the point guard, Nick Ward a big. They've both picked up the slack mightily, and you saw that if you watched Michigan State play Ohio State this past weekend. I unfortunately did not, but all the highlights, all the stats that I've read, heard, that's exactly what happened. So Michigan State getting it done without their leading scorer prior to him being out with an injury. But, again, it's not supposed to be anything major. But interesting to see that Michigan State, not talking about beating Northwestern here, but beating Ohio State over the past weekend, that was impressive to do without what was and what is really their top go-to guy offensively as far as scoring-wise goes. Also what happened on the second, Maryland at home against Nebraska. Maryland won that game. I believe in the final seconds it was 74-72. The game was back and forth. These two teams, to me, are pretty even. Nebraska at the time was ranked, but Maryland won the game. Maryland obviously won 74-72. And Bruno Fernando, the guy inside, who's going to be in the NBA, 18 points, 17 rebounds. Again, we talk about all the three-point shooting, this and that, but at the end of the day, that if you've got an NBA big, you're going to feel it in college basketball, and he's a first-round pick for sure. He would have been a first-round pick last year. He decided to come back. So Bruno Fernando inside for Maryland, he'll be an issue for Big Ten teams all year long, and he absolutely was. For Nebraska on Wednesday night, on Thursday, Michigan was at home to Penn State, won by 13. Indiana was at home to Illinois, won by 8. Wisconsin was at home to Minnesota, and Minnesota held down Wisconsin to 14 points in the first half. Wisconsin won the second half by 8. It still wasn't enough. Minnesota won the game 59-52. Minnesota, I mean, that's what can happen if you play the style of basketball that Wisconsin plays, and that's, again, not to say anything bad on Wisconsin basketball or Virginia basketball or any team that wants to slow it down more often than not, but if you score 14 points and a half, you better hold the other team to like 20. And they held Minnesota to 29. So they were down 15 at halftime. That was too much to come back from. So
that's a big win. That's a big win for Minnesota.
Yeah. Minnesota's won 6 straight, I think, overall. Yeah, 6 straight. They're 2-1 in conference. That's, going on the road to Wisconsin, winning like that. That was impressive.
And I just talked about it. You've got to find ways to win on the road, and Minnesota did. I mean, Minnesota's one of those teams probably not going to get a lot of national hype, Kevin, but that's a solid team up there in Minnesota. You know, they're going to be able to go out. You know, you look at the final score. Will they struggle offensively? Sure, but they can play good defense also. So when you can play good defense, if you get it against a team that's not shooting well, a.k.a. that Wisconsin game, and you can find a way to muster out some points, hey, there you go. That's what you got to do. You just got to find a way to win on the road. And so, you know, I'm going to take one of your hats and throw it off for the Gopher basketball team.
Yeah, it was an impressive one for sure. And they're 12-2 overall right now. So that's, you know, you're wanting to get to 20 wins. They are certainly on their way to doing so. They only need 8 more. Not that 20 is an automatic shoe-in for sure, but on their way. Starting the Big Ten season well, starting the overall regular season well at 12-2. Also Thursday night, Purdue was at home to Iowa, and this is again kind of a fringe top 25 battle. Purdue won the game 86-70. They scored 52 points in the first half. Carson Edwards had 21 points. I'm surprised he only had 21, because if Purdue scores 86, usually Carson scores like 30. That's usually the way it goes. But Purdue was able to thoroughly take care of Iowa at home. Purdue had, what was it? They basically just had everyone chip in. Harms on the inside, Wheeler's a forward. They both had double digits, but basically all of their guys chipped in 5, 6, 8, 9, 10, 14 points apiece, and that's what Purdue's going to need all season long. It can't be just the Carson Edwards show. So that was good to see, Purdue getting a win over, again, what could be a tournament team. Realistically, on Saturday, Ohio State was at home to Michigan State, and this was the game I was talking about. Michigan State won the game 86-77. Again, without Josh Langford, and who is their most skilled scorer, inside, outside, whatever. He's a guard, but he's their most skilled scorer. And Cassius Winston had 25 points in this game, the point guard, more known for distributing, but he is showing that he can score. He's shown that in the past, but he usually doesn't put up 25 points. 25 points, 5 assists. He shot 67% from the field, made a couple threes. So, I mean, Michigan State can win by scoring 86. They can win by scoring 66. You're seeing Michigan State, in general, score a lot more points, I think, this year than in years past. This year they're averaging 87 a game. They're averaging 83 in Big Ten play, 87 overall. Average margin of victory is 19. Even in Big Ten play, it's 17. We're only 4 games into the season. But Michigan State showing that they have firepower even without Josh Langford. So this team's really starting to get good. And we're only 15 games in. I mean, we've got, another 15, 20 to go. So Michigan State beating Ohio State on the road the way they did, that was impressive. Ohio State even had a lead at halftime, but Michigan State scored 50 in the second half to win the game. So Ohio State proved they can hang with Michigan State, but at the end of the day, Michigan State, even without their top scorer, can go on the road and put 50 points on, arguably a Sweet 16 level team in Ohio State. So I was definitely impressed with Michigan State there. I think Michigan State is dangerous this year, and Michigan State, when fully healthy, has the horses to beat anyone. They always trailed Kansas early in the year. I think it was the first game of the year. But they hung with Kansas. They ended up losing by 5. And I think that's pretty indicative of how good this Michigan State team is. I think they can hang with anyone. They can beat anyone. And I think right now they're just playing as good as you can ask for.
Yeah, you just look at the body of work. And the thing is that, Kevin, at Michigan State, you lose your top scorer, a lot of programs will be like, oh, crap. And Michigan State, it literally is the next man up mentality. Because Izzo goes out and recruits very well. Very well. And he's not afraid to play young guys if he has to. And, you look at his last 2 recruiting classes, Kevin, you go from top down. I mean, he's got a loaded roster. He's done a great job recruiting out there. And, it's Michigan State. They are a nationally predominant team, so kids are going to want to play for him. But you got to look at all the competition for recruiting. Going up against guys, do you want to go to Duke, North Carolina? Oh, Michigan State's in the mix. Where are you going to rank Michigan State? I mean, in all fairness. I mean, they're going to be 3rd. But Izzo still goes out and gets these top guys and guys that can come in off the bench if somebody goes down. And that's why I think he's one of the greatest coaches in college basketball history. Izzo just knows how to recruit, knows how to coach. Somebody gets hurt, he can fill it in with a guy off the bench, and they just go right into the system, and they play, and they have success. So clapping for Tom Izzo. He does a great job at Michigan State.
Yeah. Nothing new there. Michigan State has a good basketball coach and a good football coach, believe it or not. But actually, some people won't believe that they have a good football coach. But anyway, to get off Michigan State football, Maryland also traveled on the road to Rutgers on Saturday night, and Maryland won the game by 14. Maryland held Rutgers to 19 points in the first half. They were up 21 in the first half. So that they were able to cruise in that one. Maryland's 3-1 right now in Big Ten play. I think they're a solid, good team right now. I think that they are one of my 7 to make the NCAA tournament. I'll say that. I think they're good enough both on the outside and the inside. And I already talked about Fernando on the inside, but both outside, inside. I think Maryland's just a very solid team this year. I think they are. I think a year older than they were a year ago.
Yeah, and they took care of business against teams they should take care of business. That's what you got to do. You got to take care of it. And again, no slight to the teams that we call the bottom four, but really you've got to take care of business in the bottom four because, like I said before, one of those teams is going to pull an upset or a couple of them. If you don't go ready to play, like if Maryland wasn't ready to play at Rutgers, we know Rutgers struggles mightily. And our goal for Rutgers is NIT, baby. I mean, we want Rutgers to get into the NIT.
I'm hoping for CIT. That third tournament.
Yeah, that third tournament. For them, a 500 record, that would be amazing.
Yeah.
Because they'd have to do some damage in the Big Ten. But for those bottom four teams, they're going to play. It's not like they're waving the white flag like, oh, we got to play Maryland. Let's just give them a W. They're going to play. And if you're not ready to play and you don't take care of business, one of those bottom four teams will beat you. And that will put a big damper on you getting into the big dance. So you got to be ready to play. And Maryland just took care of business. They did what they had to do.
Yeah. I not that I love this Maryland team, but I like them because they're just very solid. And I think they will get things done against those bottom four teams, like you mentioned, Troy. Nothing against them. But Sunday, I believe it was afternoon, Michigan hosted Indiana. Michigan took care of business. They were up 15 points in the first half. I think you're kind of seeing that a lot, at least this past week, that Michigan's better than Indiana. So they were up 15 in the first half. Maryland's better than Rutgers, so they were up 21 in the first half. I'm about to talk about Wisconsin-Penn State. Wisconsin was up 10 points in the first half. They also won the second half, no problem. But yeah, you're seeing these teams flex their muscles as they should, so to say. So anyway, Michigan 74-63 against Indiana. I think really what you're looking for Michigan is offense, because I think that Michigan defensively is a monster, and they're probably the second best defense in college basketball, right behind Texas Tech that I talked about to start the show. So this team right now, they've got three legitimate scorers. That Brad Stakis guy, the freshman, that no one was really sure how good he was actually going to be coming into the year. He was supposed to be good, but not great, and he's proven to be really good. 3-point wise, he's averaging 16 and 5 rebounds, shooting over 39% from three. He's really good offensively. Charles Matthews has been there before. Jordan Poole has been there before. Jordan Poole is shooting 47% from three. That's absurd. All three of those guys averaging at least 14 a game. That's huge to me. I think that's really because, again, this team can lock teams down to 60 points. It's just a matter of scoring 65, 70. And if you've got three guys you can count on, it's not just a one-man show. That's what I really like about this Michigan team, and that's why they're ranked number 2 in the country. That's why they're 15-0. Because they've got a number of ways to score, inside, outside. Doesn't matter. And we talked about it before that this team they're playing only 7 guys, only over 5 minutes a game, 6 minutes a game if you want to be technical. Only 7 guys averaging over 6 minutes a game, at least 6 minutes a game. So it's weird. If you get in foul trouble one game, that could prove to be deadly. But again, this team defensively is not going to miss a beat because one guy gets into foul trouble. And they're not solely reliant on one big guy. They're not solely reliant on one shooter or one outside guy. So they're just a strong 7 deep, so to say, which you can live with 7. Most teams will usually crank it down to 8. You either usually have 7 or 8 in March Madness, but if you're 7 strong and you don't have necessarily just one go-to guy who's carrying the load offensively or defensively, obviously offensively, you carry the load more, but this Michigan team is well-rounded despite only being 7 deep. That's why they have not suffered a loss so far this year. So being at home to Indiana, again, being up 15 at half, that's what Michigan, the number 2 team in the country, should do. So I'm impressed with Michigan, but they're doing what they should. You got anything on them, Troy?
No, they just keep winning.
Yeah.
They put teams away. like you said, they flex their muscles. They play good defense. Right now there's nothing more to talk about other than they're playing good basketball, and they just keep taking care of business.
Yeah. They're averaging giving up 55 points a game, by the way. Over the course of this season, they're only giving up 58 a game in Big Ten play, too. So it's really not that much of a difference. Give up 63 to Indiana, who's a good offensive team. Moving on, Wisconsin beat Penn State by 19. Again, they were up 10 at half. You listened to part of the game, Troy, at least part of it. I did not get to see anything from it whatsoever, but I can read that Ethan Happ had 22 and 8 with 4 assists. And Penn State overall, I would assume they shot pretty poorly. Let's take a look. 37% from the field, 20% from three. Well, there you go. Not much.
Yeah,
not much
and they just, in the second half, just went on this long scoring drought, and they've done it in the last couple of games. And the announcers, I listened to the Penn State announcers on the radio, which I get it where I lived. I get it every Penn State game. And when the announcer says we're bad, I mean that's pretty bad when your own announcers are saying it. And there was a point in the game in the second half, I think there was like 12 minutes to go. The announcer said, just foul Happ, make him earn his points. Don't give him the baskets. And that's where Wisconsin was flexing their muscles. We're going to give it to our all Big Ten guy, and he's just going to score. And the announcers are like, just foul him, make him shoot foul shots. If he makes them, so what? He's going to make the basket anyway. So that tells you how undermanned Penn State is inside. Like the announcers were calling for them just to foul Happ when he got the ball and just get to the one-on-one and take your chance. Because that's how dominating Happ was in that game. Now, again, I didn't watch it. I was just listening. But Penn State had no answer for Happ inside. And the announcers were even saying, just foul him. At least make him shoot, too, to try to get his points because he's not missing. He was dominating inside. And, again, what you're seeing, Kevin, is teams, when they're playing the bottom four, and I guess that's what we'll keep calling them, the bottom four, they're not letting them hang around. They're going out and they're dominating. Because, again, if you look,
I think Troy just got cut off there. But, in general, these teams that are not in the bottom four, like a.k.a. the top 10, they're not really losing to these teams, like Northwestern. Oh, there you
go. They're going out and they're taking care of business. So I'm actually probably getting into a dead zone, so I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Fair enough. Moving on, Nebraska, Iowa. Iowa was at home to Nebraska. At the time, they were both ranked in the top 25. Nebraska 24, Iowa 25. Iowa won this game 93-84. That's obviously high scoring in college basketball, if you did not know. Iowa is a team that even last year, realistically, they were not good last year, but they still scored points. They just couldn't defend. This year, they're scoring points even more so. They still can't really defend, but they can score. Iowa right now 1-3 in Big Ten play, but again, their only win is against Nebraska, who is a quality team. Even though Nebraska's only 1-3 in Big Ten play, those are still two quality teams. And so Nebraska being able to score 93, yes, they're at home, but it's still impressive against a senior-laden Nebraska team. I think Iowa, realistically, they are one of my, 3 teams that don't make it that are in the top 10 from the Big Ten. They're on the outs to me, but it's games like this where, yes, Iowa can score 93 and they can win, or Iowa can play Michigan State and score 83 and win if they, want to pull an upset. So they have
or they could score 83 and lose 85-83.
Correct. In Big Ten play, they're averaging giving up 83 points a game. So that's why they're 1-3 so far. Defensively, it's been a mess. Luckily for them, offensively against Nebraska Sunday night, it was enough. But that's the case with Iowa. Moving on, last game Sunday night, Northwestern hosted Illinois. two bottom four teams, should say. Illinois had a lead at halftime. Northwestern won it back at the end. Northwestern hit a 3 with 10 seconds left to basically give them the lead and the win at the end of the game. So Northwestern did what they needed to do at the end of the game to keep Illinois off the winning. I can't even think of the word, but Illinois 0-4, still winless in Big Ten play. Northwestern got their first Big Ten win, so good for them. There's nothing really else to say here. It was a close game. Both these teams, again, kind of fighting for NIT bids, in my opinion.
Yeah, I got nothing to say.
Monday.
Yeah, there's nothing to say when teams like that are battling.
Yeah. Monday, the 7th, that is when we were recording the show. So that is it. As far as recapping, as far as previewing, I'll go through the list of games. I'm not going to get into, the X's and O's of it on this week's show. But on Tuesday night, if you're wanting to watch Big Ten basketball for the week ahead, give you a quick preview of these games. Maryland is traveling to Minnesota. That'll be an interesting game because Maryland, we've been talking about Maryland. Yeah, Maryland's been playing really well. Minnesota, like I said, won 6 straight. They're 12-2 overall. 2 teams in those what is it? I want to get this right. 2, 4, 6, 8. 8 teams above 500 right now in Big Ten play. 2 of them, Maryland, Minnesota. So,
well, this will be again, Maryland now going on the road again. Now they went on the road to Rutgers. I mean, that's not like an intimidating place to play. But for Maryland now, they've got that road win against Rutgers. They took care of business. This would be a huge win for Maryland to be able to go on the road to Minnesota and win. And for Minnesota, it's huge to be able to defend your home turf. And, ask Wisconsin. Minnesota got one on them. You don't want to give up those home games. This is going to be a good one. Way to start off the week of Big Ten basketball. I mean, not a lot of people. Maryland, Minnesota. Who cares? I think it's going to be a good one.
Yeah, it's arguably these types of games that say, okay, Maryland went on the road and won this one. Like that's a quality win on the road against a quality team. That could be a game like this that, yeah, you know what, we'll get Maryland into the tournament, as opposed to St. John's or California or whoever. It could be games like these where it's like, yes, that going on the road, yes, or Minnesota being able to hold home court advantage and not give up a game to another team fighting on the bubble potentially at the end of the year. That could be the difference between, yeah, we'll give Maryland the leg up because they went to Minnesota and won. Resume is basically equal. I'm just, completely foreshadowing months ahead, so this could be completely stupid and pointless. But it's these type of teams that will likely be potentially on the bubble. And so it's games like these that are important.
Or for Maryland, Kevin, if they go to Minnesota and win, maybe that's the type of win that separates themselves from the middle of the pack and they fall into that 3-4 spot.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how important this early season game is. And we're only, like you said, 3 or 4 games into the conference schedule. But there's already important games being played.
Yeah, and the top 4 teams get double byes in the Big Ten tournament, which is huge. If you get a double bye and your first game you're losing to Michigan State or you're losing to a Wisconsin or, that's not a bad loss. It doesn't necessarily help you to beat Rutgers and then beat Iowa and then lose to, it's fine if that's your Big Ten tournament resume, so to say, at the end of the year, but you're not proving anything by doing that. If you get a double bye and you lose to Indiana, you lose to Ohio State, it is what it is, and no one's going to dock you for that. So getting a double bye to start in the Big Ten tournament not only helps you rest-wise, but potentially down the line, it can certainly help you. And there are not 4 dominant teams in the Big Ten. There's not. There's 2, but the other 2 spots are up for grabs. Right now, Indiana and Maryland would have them. But it's wide open, those other 2 double bye spots, which I think could be very important. Down the line, the other game Tuesday night, Michigan State hosting Purdue. could be interesting, but I think you're going to see a good Michigan State team hold down what is a one-man show in Purdue. If Purdue pulls an upset here, they play team basketball, and it's not even necessarily playing team basketball. It's more other guys stepping up. It's not like Carson Edwards is this ball hog that, doesn't know how to pass the ball. So I don't want excuse me. I don't want anyone to think that that's what I'm talking about when I talk about Purdue, because I seem to talk about them that way a lot this year. I've already noticed that it's, a one-man show and it's the Carson Edwards show.
There's no supporting cast, youngster.
Yeah.
That's
there
what's missing.
There's guys
that can play.
Right.
But it's not the supporting cast that we were used to having on the court when we watch Purdue.
Right.
Usually they got a guy they got a big, they got a couple wing players, and there's multiple guys that can damage you. Really, like you said, Carson Edwards is the only one that can damage you consistently. Yeah. There's guys that can play, that can contribute, but nobody that scares anybody. He just doesn't have a supporting cast. And I just wanted to reiterate that for the fans listening in, that exactly what you're saying. It's just he's the guy. And if you shut him down, there's got to be other guys that step up. They're capable of doing it, but they don't have the supporting cast that Purdue has had the last couple of years, where you shut one guy down, Swanigan will step up. You shut down Swanigan, there's Edwards, he'll step up. They don't have a guy that's going to go in and be, okay, well, I'm going to take the game over. Since they're shutting down Edwards, I'll just take the game over. They don't have that guy this year.
Yep, 100% agreed. Perfect way to put it. Moving on, Wednesday, Ohio State travels to Rutgers. That's,
There. Use your new DVR on that one, my friend.
That's okay. That's fine. I'll leave it off. Iowa travels to Northwestern. That could be interesting. We'll see if it's games like these for Iowa that really, hey, if you're really wanting to make a push at the NCAA tournament, Iowa needs to go to Northwestern and win. That's a must-win game for Iowa. Not to say that if they lose, they can't make the NCAA tournament, but it's games like these when you're playing the bottom four. If you're fighting for a spot on the bubble, you can't have games losing to Illinois and Rutgers and Penn State and Northwestern.
Youngster, if they lose to Northwestern, that will give them 4 Big Ten losses.
Yeah.
I know they're playing 16 or 20 this year, but are they going to go 16-4? Think about it. 4 losses out of 5 games that would be for Iowa if Northwestern would pull an upset. And I'm not calling a Northwestern upset, but I'm going to go back to what I said. You have to be ready to play against the bottom 4. And the way Iowa plays, they have to go on the road. They have to continually shoot well. And again, going on the road in the Big Ten, I know it's, like you said, I know it's Northwestern this year. Not a dominant team, a team that we have categorized in the bottom 4. But if Iowa's not ready to play and Iowa has a poor shooting night, Northwestern could steal one at home. This is where you have to be ready to go on the road and steal that game. And Northwestern's just not going to give it to Iowa, so they better be ready to play. And if they lose, you called it a must-win. It is a must-win, Kevin. To all of a sudden have 4 losses in the Big Ten after 5 games, they're really behind the 8 ball if that happens.
Yeah, agreed, 100%. Thursday night, Michigan travels to Illinois. That Illinois wants to run up and down the court. They're not going to be able to run up and down the court. Or they will. They'll just shoot it inefficiently.
They can try.
That one's going to go. Yeah, exactly. You can try. You can.
They might run up and down the court without the basketball.
Yeah, not going to be DVRing that one. That one's on FS1, by the way. That's not even BTN. That's nationally televised.
Yeah, that's a good one to put there. That's a great one. That'll be one of those games you want to look at the over and see what the over is, and see if you're a gambling monopoly money guy, that's what you want to look for. Carry on.
Penn State at Nebraska. Nebraska should take care of business. If they don't, Nebraska would fall to 1-4 in Big Ten play. So exactly what we just talked about with Iowa. Nebraska should take care of business. But if they don't, we'll certainly be talking about it next week. Indiana travels to play Maryland on Friday. That's another big one. That's also an FS1. Back-to-back games. Purdue travels to Wisconsin. That's another important one. It's two teams going to be jockeying for position within the top 10 of the Big Ten, pushing for a spot in the NCAA tournament. So two good games Friday night if you're looking for basketball to watch in the Big Ten, both games on FS1. Indiana at Maryland, Purdue at Wisconsin. Again, not going to get into either game, but it'll be interesting to see the Carson Edwards show against Ethan Happ in Wisconsin. That defense going against Carson Edwards will be fun and entertaining to see, for sure. So Friday night Big Ten basketball going to be interesting. You got anything on those, Troy?
Well, I'm a Badger fan, so of course, I want my Badgers to regain that home court advantage. I mean, Purdue traveling there, that's not an easy game. I mean, Minnesota came there, and I look at these teams, and Wisconsin has to really bear down, and they've got to figure out some consistent flow offensively. Because we just mentioned that Purdue doesn't have that other guy that's stepping up right now, the supporting cast. So if that Wisconsin defense can shut down Edwards, I hope this is not the game that they find a guy they can go to. And that's purely as a fan. I don't want it to happen. From the standpoint of us hosting this show, that's the game Purdue needs to find that guy, because Edwards will get his points, but it's going to be hard.
Yeah.
He's going to have to earn them against Wisconsin. And that's the game that Purdue will have to find that secondary guy that can take over a game when everybody is going to suffocate on Edwards. That'll be a good one. That'll really be a good one. I'll have to try to find that one.
Friday night, FS1, 9 o'clock Eastern. There you go. DVR it. Saturday, not as interesting, the two games, but still can be interesting. Rutgers at Minnesota. Again, Minnesota should take care of business there. And then after that, Ohio State travels to Iowa. That's going to be interesting for both teams. If Ohio State is as good as they think they are and people think they are, maybe they should go to Iowa and win. If Iowa needs to make a statement victory, and this is one of your opportunities, over a top 20 ranked team in the Big Ten, you're at home. So if you're that good, if you're a top 25 team, if you're an NCAA tournament team, maybe you should take care of business against Ohio State when you're at home. So interesting games for Iowa this week coming up. Sunday, Michigan State travels to Penn State. It's, Michigan State is one of the two powerhouses in this conference, in my opinion. Even on the road against Penn State, and they should, again, take care of business early and make it obvious. And then Michigan is at home to Northwestern as well Sunday night. That's the final game of the week for the Big Ten before we do our next week's show. And again, Michigan at home against one of the four bottom teams. So Michigan should take care of business. There's no real point to get into either of those games, but certainly some interesting games throughout the week, as there always will be. This is a 20-game schedule. There are plenty of Big Ten teams jockeying for positioning and trying to get double byes, trying to get in the top 7 or 8 to hopefully ensure themselves in the NCAA tournament. So there are always going to be good games and interesting games featuring interesting teams in this conference, basically no matter the day of the week. But it's games like Michigan State, Penn State, and Michigan Northwestern where if it's going to be bad on any given night in Big Ten, that would basically be it. Is when Michigan State play two of the bottom 4 teams. So that's all I got, really, Troy, for this week's show. Unless you've got anything to add.
No, again, I'm just excited. I mean, you look at that schedule. We just went over it. Yeah, there's a couple so-called fuddy-duddies in there. But these games, and if you're listening to this podcast, you're a Big Ten fan. Maybe it's just of your team, but you know the relevance of a Maryland, Minnesota. I mean, that's a huge game. Purdue, Wisconsin. And actually, there's still some allure to that Purdue, Wisconsin. You think about 2-3 years back, Kevin. I mean, that was a good battle. Both teams have kind of went down a little bit as far as, star power goes. So it's still but it's a big game for both of them because we talk about getting that separation up into that double bye, and that's really what we're talking about. You got two teams that are pretty much locked into the 68, and that's Michigan State and Michigan. And then you've got, like you said, you think you've got 7 going, but there's really the potential of 10 teams. And that's how we'll kind of take it as we move forward. You know, even though Iowa and Nebraska off to a slow start, they're quality teams. These games already early in the season, you've already brought out the must-win.
Yeah.
And that's the way that it works.
January. Yeah.
And it's tough to go on the road and win in the Big Ten, and that's what we've kind of talked about on this show. You got to steal a game, and not steal a game against the Rutgers or a Northwestern or an Illinois, like a Purdue going to Wisconsin. And if I'm Wisconsin, you can't give up another game at home. Every game you give up at home, you've got to win 2 on the road. I mean, that's the way that it works out.
Yeah.
A loss at home, you got to go on the road and you got to win 2. You've got to hold serve at home. And so for Purdue, there you go. This would be a huge quality win on the road.
Yep.
Now I'm excited, Kevin. I love full Big Ten basketball. With that said, everybody, make sure you find us on Twitter at Youngster Old Man. That is our show handle. Find the Youngster at King Honey. The Old Man is at Troy Robert 967. Hope you enjoyed the show today. We'll get back at you next week.